Good afternoon. Those of you who know me know that I'm Rick Kidder, President and CEO of the South Coast Chamber, and when we say good afternoon, that should solicit a response. Good afternoon. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and as Kim had mentioned, it's wonderful to see so many people in attendance today for the State of the City address with Mayor Mitchell. Today we've had the pleasure of hearing from gifted young students from New Bedford High School. You were greeted by New Bedford High's talented jazz combo playing as you entered the building. That jazz combo was under the direction of Tim Mason. Let's give them a hand. You've also had an opportunity to hear the New Bedford High School Jazz Choir, and we'll hear them again in a medley. The Jazz Choir is an after-school choral group under the direction of Lynn Dandino and accompanied by Nancy Sparklin. The 10 members of the Jazz Choir are participants in other performing arts groups, including the Concert Band, the Drama Club, Jazz Band, Concert Chorale, and SATB Show Choir. They perform at music department-sponsored concerts and at local events. They will sing the song selection Kiss the Girl, arranged by Kirby Shaw, and Blackbird, arranged by Mark Brimmer. Please welcome our Jazz Choir.
There you see sitting there across the way. She don't got a lot to say, but there's something about her. And you don't know why, but you're dying to try. You wanna kiss the girl. Yes, you want her. Look at her, you know you do. Possible she wants you to. There is one way to ask her. It don't take a word, not a single word. Go on and kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, my oh my. Look like a boy too shy. Ain't gonna kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, ain't that sad? Ain't it a shame? Too bad he gonna miss the girl. Now's your moment, floating in a blue lagoon. Boy, you better do it soon. No time will be better. She don't say a word, and she won't say a word until you kiss the girl. Go kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, don't be scared. You got the mood prepared. Go on and kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, don't stop now. Don't try to hide it. How you wanna kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, float along and listen to the song. The song say, kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la, the music play. Do what the music say. You gotta kiss the girl. You've got to kiss the girl. You wanna kiss the girl. Go on and kiss the girl.
That was wonderful. Next stop, The Voice. We have numerous elected officials with us today who have taken time out of their busy schedules to join us. Please give a wave as I announce your name. We're very pleased to have Attorney General Maura Healey. Thank you, Attorney. Representing our legislative delegation, Representative Tony Cabral. Tony. We are pleased to have representatives from the offices of Senator Warren, Senator Markey, and Congressman Keating. Thank you for being with us. We're also very pleased to have the Honorable Tom Hoy, Mayor of the City of Taunton. Thank you. And representing the New Bedford City Council, President Linda Morad, Joe Lopes, Deb Coelho, Hugh Dunn, Maria Giesta, Naomi Carney, Brad Markey, Dana Ribeiro, Scott Lima, Brian Gomes, and Ian Abreu. From the New Bedford School Committee, we have Joshua Amaral, Bruce Oliveira, and Joaquim Livramento. I apologize if we missed anyone, but thank you very, very much for being here. A major event like this also requires the support of many professionals to make it successful. So we would like to recognize a few others for their involvement today. Dave and Mike from Lightworks Productions for providing the sound today. Thank you. Reynolds DeWalt for printing the invitations. The New Bedford High School students and staff for helping us through this afternoon. The Port of New Bedford for providing the shuttles. The Century House for preparing today's delicious meal. The Mayor's Office for their assistance in organizing today's program. Sergio from Bad Monkey Pics for the wonderful photography, and all of our media partners for their participation in covering this event. We are now going to enjoy a short video presentation before I introduce the mayor this afternoon. Mayor, you could cut your speech. That looks like a State of the City address. You know, one of the most important things that one can bring to any position and any place of business is pride of place. And the pride of place is evident in New Bedford now, and New Bedford needs to give itself a hand. Since taking office in 2012, New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell has pursued an ambitious, wide-ranging agenda to promote investment, job growth, reform our public schools, modernize our port, upgrade the city's physical appearance, and solidify the city's status as the cultural and economic center of the entire region. The mayor has accomplished a great deal over the past 7 years. New Bedford has enjoyed one of the steepest drops in unemployment in the country, a dramatic drop in crime, a more efficient and responsive city government, widespread upgrades in public infrastructure, and new public amenities like the Harbor Walk, Cove Walk, and neighborhood parks. Along the way, the city has emerged as a national leader on renewable energy, the ocean economy, and arts and cultural programming. In short, New Bedford is on the right track, and it is my honor today to introduce to you the one who is leading the way, Mayor John Mitchell.
All right, thank you everybody. All right, sit down, you got your dessert, we got a lot to talk about today. So, I want to start off by thanking Rick and the Chamber for putting together another fabulous event. And to Webster Bank, of course, for its continuing sponsorship. We understand this to be the largest State of the City address in the entire state after Boston, and it's a real tribute to the Chambers and the business community's commitment to the city's success. I want to thank Headmaster Bernadette Coelho for hosting us today. To Sue Richard for that first-rate video. You're right, I could have just sat down right away. And to the New Bedford Jazz Choir for that fabulous performance. Great job, guys. And I want to thank City Council President Linda Morad and all the city councilors and school committee members, Representative Cabral, and Attorney General Maura Healey for all they do all the time to support New Bedford in every way. I am pleased today to be joined by my wife, Ann, for this occasion, and I will seize the opportunity to proclaim for everyone just how proud I am of the work that she does day in and day out to improve the lives of women diagnosed with breast cancer, both through her research as well as her direct care of patients. She inspires me to be on my game every day. And it's a treat to be joined by my children as well, Grace and Natalie, who are students here at New Bedford High School, as well as Lauren, who's come from all the way across the street from Keith Middle School. So Ann and I believe very strongly in having dinner together as a family as much as possible. And so that's what we're doing here today. And and it's just even better that the 500 or so of you can join us for this occasion. So family meals start off with the question oftentimes, so how are things? And so too with State of the City addresses. The answer today is New Bedford, thank you very much, is on a roll. As recently as 2012, the city was reeling from the Great Recession with an unemployment rate of over 13%, a crime rate well above the average for American cities, precarious finances, absentee landlords ruining neighborhoods, a port stumbling as a result of the crash of the groundfish industry, and a directionless school system that did not have kids first and foremost in mind, as well as neglected city buildings, and as we all know, neglected roadways. These challenges and many more were daunting, but we made a conscious decision not to recline in the false hope that somebody else, the state or anyone, was going to bail us out of it. We decided to take control of our own affairs. We decided there was no room for passivity at all. We went ahead and began the rebuilding of our city, and it has made all the difference in the world. We stand here today and can take pride that through the work of our city residents, our businesses, and our city employees, that New Bedford is staging one of the most remarkable urban turnarounds in America. We have witnessed eye-popping job growth across the board, so much so that twice in the last 6 years, New Bedford, Massachusetts has led all American cities in its year-over-year drop in unemployment rate. Not once, but twice. There are some 6,000 more city residents working today than in January of 2012, and an unemployment rate that, as you heard in that video, stands at 4.7%. Our business park is now full. The port is booming, and small businesses have sprung up just about in every corner of the city. More importantly, more of our residents are able to provide for their families, to live the American dream in our cities, and including sending their kids to college. Now, job creation doesn't happen if a city isn't making headway on other fronts. While other cities have struggled to move the needle on crime, New Bedford is a palpably safer city now. According to FBI crime data, violent crime has fallen over 50% since 2014. Again, one of the sharpest drops anywhere. We've modernized the financial management system, and now New Bedford has the highest bond rating in its history. At different points in the last few years, we've been #1 in installed municipal solar capacity per capita in the United States, and have had the largest fleet of electric vehicles of any place in Massachusetts. Last year, the state removed the monitor from the school system and noted that this school system is in an extremely different district than it was in 2011. All of these objective measures proclaim progress unambiguously. They're there in case someone you run into is still clinging to those old stereotypes of New Bedford, and you can just go ahead and say to them, you know what, don't believe me, just look at the numbers. But for me personally, what's more compelling is our track record of tackling challenges that people thought we couldn't do. For me personally, nothing gets me going more when someone says you can't do something. You know how that feels. Well, in the last few years together, we in New Bedford have said, we're going to show you, and show everybody we have. People used to say our harbor, the first marine Superfund site in America, was never going to be cleaned up after decades of industrial pollution. Never going to happen. But thanks to the close working relationship of the city, our federal delegation, and the EPA, the cleanup is well underway and will be completed 30 years ahead of schedule. It wasn't that long ago that people looked at the city's 4-year high school graduation rate hovering around 60% and said, that's just the way it's always going to be. To my mind, it was unconscionable to write off children like that. They deserve better from us. Thanks to the hard work of school administrators, the nonprofit sector, and many people in this building, the state just announced that the graduation rate has risen to 76%, the highest ever recorded here. That's a whole lot of New Bedford kids who will have a much better shot at life, and everybody in this building I know is filled with pride that they could pull that off. This is an achievement that we should all, as a city, take pride in. Countless people, here's another one, countless people have said for decades, You know what? It doesn't make any sense to me that the term of mayor is only 2 years long. And so the chamber and many of you in the business community and indomitable volunteers like Leslie Lawrence said, you know what, we're going to change it to 4 years. And you know what? You did. Now, don't get any ideas. I don't have any plans for announcements today about my own future. Let's put that aside for the moment. Years, and by the way, for years, some people, and one of them was right with us, City Councilor Brian Gomes, said, we should put a walkway on top of the hurricane barrier. Wouldn't that be cool? And everybody said, no, that's just too crazy. Well, that got done too. What about the restoration of the First Baptist Church, where Robert's Rules of Order originated, one of the most important of all the city's landmarks? Well, that restoration's underway as well. Here's another example. Full days of school in elementary schools on Friday. Go figure, right? Why didn't that happen? Well, now, because we put our mind to it, it did. And what about the deteriorating face of City Hall? That's been falling apart for years. Well, we fixed it up because that's the house of the people in our city. So many other things that people have said that we should do, but for whatever reason, just never seem to happen. The filtration of Sassaquin Pond, a new fleet of fire trucks, free public concerts on the water. Done, done, done. All of them. If there is one lesson to draw from our work over the last several years, it's this. Decline is not inevitable. It isn't. For a city that has suffered job loss and capital flight for decades after the Great Depression, and all the challenges that came with them, many people, and it was very tempting to do this, many people just thought that decline was kind of like the weather. There's nothing you can do about it. It just happens to you. In the last few years, we have proven to ourselves and to everybody else that's just not true. It isn't. Richard Florida, one of the leading observers of life of America's cities and the author of the celebrated treatise, The Rise of the Creative Class, wrote recently the following. After years of study, I've concluded that the key thing that distinguishes the thriving places of any and all sizes is surprisingly simple. Successful places are intentional. I could not imagine a more encouraging and validating observation about cities and about our city. The implication is that despite the global forces that affect the city's ability to move forward, if you have a common vision and have the willingness and the guts to pursue it, you have in your hands the ability to shape your own future. The good news is that we in New Bedford have been doing this all along. We've understood where we want to go, to solidify New Bedford as the economic and cultural center of the region with a diversified and resilient economic base. And we have worked together toward that vision. So many of you in the room have, and so many who aren't here today. We have to continue to do that. For all the success that we've had in Greater New Bedford over the last few years, looking ahead, we've got our work cut out for us. To say that the world is changing rapidly is an understatement. Globalization and new technology are transforming America's cities at an accelerating rate. Businesses can locate just about anywhere, as so many of you know, and they are tending to gravitate to major metropolitan areas like Boston and New York, which are established centers of innovation and capital. And that's why you see forests of construction cranes there nowadays, and that's why these places are magnets for young people. Technological development is unfolding so rapidly that it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in 20 years, even shorter than that. Consider for a moment your smartphone that I suspect every single one of you has on your person right now. When they arrived on the scene a mere 12 years ago, no one could have predicted that within a few short years that everybody would have one. And that not only would everybody have one, but that you would use it to manage just about everything in your life, and that whole new industries would be launched based on that platform. There is a growing consensus today among leaders in economic forecasting, the likes of McKinsey and Deloitte and the World Economic Forum and others, that within the next decade, more than half of today's jobs will be automated away. They'll be gone. And it's been going on for a while. It's starting to become more visible, though, these days. And we've seen it in a number of our warehouses and factories and in some of our fish plants. And you even see it in the grocery store. Automated checkout counters and robotic floor cleaners do work that was once done by real people. And I'm told, by the way, that, and maybe you've seen it, there's some robot that goes around the Stop and Shop in the South End. It has eyes and everything. You probably have seen. If you I haven't seen it, I'm going to check it out. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's the kind of work that used to be done by people. More of that is going to happen. And the reality is that automation will directly affect those metropolitan economies that are heavily dependent on lower skilled service or traditional manufacturing jobs. And because we, New Bedford, are one of those places, in the years ahead, we're going to need to be on our game. We need to be taking steps now to get out ahead of these trends to ensure that we can continue to sustain our city and make opportunity available for all of our residents, wherever they are. To my mind, there are three related elements of our city building work, all of which require sustained collective effort. First, we must make the most of our competitive advantages to build a diversified economy that works for everybody. Second, we must nurture a high quality of life, both as an end in itself, but also as a means to attract investment. And third, we must reinforce our connection to place, that part of our identity associated with our city, so that we can have a cause to rally around, not just today, but in the long run. So let's look at each one of these elements. When it comes to economic competitiveness, municipal government and the business community must continue to work closely together and collaboratively to build a regional economy that is inclusive and centered around the city of New Bedford. The Regeneration Committee, under the leadership of Tony Sapienza and Jerry Kavanaugh, has been critical in this effort. The committee has brought together the leadership of Greater New Bedford's business community time and again and has worked closely with my administration in developing an economic development plan, and then just as importantly, if not more so, executing on it. Few cities in America, have this kind of formal mechanism to collaborate with business, and it is a real advantage for us. The plan makes clear that what we've been saying all along, that we must make the most of our competitive advantages. That is to say, just so we're all clear, that we focus on what we do really well and build on that. While the economies of cities are founded on assets, other cities are founded on assets like research universities and international airports and tourist meccas, our greatest competitive advantage, as you've heard this from me before, lies in our connection to the water. The Port of New Bedford is extremely successful. As you heard in the video, according to a recent state-funded analysis, the port generates some $11 billion in direct and induced economic activity and supports nearly 7,000 jobs. Its strong suit, of course, is in fishing, as it's both the top commercial fishing port and the largest seafood processing center in the United States. Now, New Bedford, as you all know, has had a history of being number one in certain key industries, only to see its fortunes dashed when it relied on them way too much. And we're all familiar with our city's global dominance in the whaling industry, as well as its calamitous fall at the onset of the Civil War and the discovery of oil in Pennsylvania that made whale oil effectively obsolete. The city was brimming again at the end of World War I as the leader in America in cotton textile manufacturing, only to see that end abruptly 10 years later in the wake of labor strife, the lifting of protective tariffs, and Southern competition. Both times in the city's history, at both of those key moments of challenge, the city had nothing to fall back on. Recently, I was given a copy of a Saturday Evening Post article about New Bedford, a long profile, from June of 1948, which had this to say about our city. Few cities have known a more turbulent past than New Bedford. It has played the part of the reckless gambler, betting his bankroll on the turn of a single economic card. Successful cities are ones that hedge their bets so that they can absorb economic shocks and be able in the long run to seize opportunities that come before them. I'm here to tell you today that New Bedford has now learned its lesson. Perhaps for the first time in our city's history, we now have in our sights the opportunity to diversify our economic base in a major way and put the city and region on much firmer footing in the long run. Much of what makes fishing so successful here, such as the geographic proximity to a valuable natural resource, modern port infrastructure, highway and rail access, a constellation of supporting port businesses, and the most skillful seafaring workforce in America, can also work for other industries. Our job is to make the most of these advantages, and both to bolster our strength in fishing and to help create new industries that can that can thrive alongside our fishing industry and create more opportunity for our residents. There are a number of pieces coming together now, partially out of good fortune, as well as through careful strategic planning, as well as and determination, that I believe will hasten the diversification of our maritime industries. The most significant development, of course, is the arrival of the American offshore wind industry, something that we've been working on for a long time. The Vineyard Wind Project is scheduled to begin later this year, and it'll be the largest private sector investment, the largest private sector project in the state's history. Bigger than the state's casinos, bigger than the skyscrapers in Boston, bigger than even Gillette Stadium. And it will be the first of many similar projects, not just in the next few years, but in the decades to come. It has been our goal all along to capture as much of that investment as possible. Toward that end, it will be imperative that the state improve the way it procures wind projects so that companies have a stronger incentive to invest here and to grow jobs and to grow a permanent presence right on our waterfront. In the meantime, we've been getting the port ready. On that front, I can report that we are in the midst of a physical remaking of our port, the likes of which the city hasn't seen since the whaling era. And a great deal of credit goes to Ed Washburn and his team at the New Bedford Port Authority on that score. As I noted earlier, as part of one of the largest environmental cleanups in the country, the removal of contaminated sediment from our harbor floor is well underway. Soon, thanks to funding from the Baker-Polito administration, the deeper dredging of channels and berths will bring our harbor to a level of depth that will allow more vessels to pass where they need to go, at a level of depth that we haven't seen since the 1950s. At the same time, up and down the waterfront, new port facilities are either being built or rebuilt. The New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal, of course, is online, and it is America's first purpose-built marine terminal for offshore wind staging. In the last 2 years, we've restored all the municipal piers to good condition. Next year, the EPA is scheduled to turn over a terminal that it is used for the cleanup to the city, to the Port Authority, so that it can be used for fishing and offshore wind. And right next door to that, thanks to a $15 million grant that we just received with the help of Senator Markey, we will be building an 800 to 900 foot long new bulkhead that will again serve more fishing boats and more offshore wind operations. There are still other key developments. Through the leadership of Bristol Community College and the Workforce Investment Board, programs are being put in place now that will enable New Bedford to be a national leader in marine workforce training. This is happening while existing industries are growing. Much of the East Coast fishing industry is gravitating to New Bedford, with over 100 out-of-state vessels landing their fish here every single year now. We've seen the relocation of several new processing plants to our waterfront, and have seen a number of others invest millions of dollars to revamp what they do. The island ferries carried a record number of passengers this year, 120,000. And the recreational marinas are all full and have waiting lists. One of the reasons that the port has been so successful is that it has always been a center of innovation. The fishing industry has figured out time and again how to keep up with changing regulations and fish stocks by changing their business models, changing their equipment, and figuring out new methods to get the fish. Through the work of the New Bedford Ocean Cluster, which again was started by Ed Washburn a few years ago, we are now helping to create new platforms in which new maritime industries can be built by developing a marine test bed that will be unique in the United States, establishing a comprehensive aquaculture program, and creating a marine data bank using Internet of Things technology that will be valuable to a whole array of ocean businesses. A lot is happening on the waterfront, and I wanted you to hear all of it, but our goal, simply stated, is to establish New Bedford as the leading ocean economy city on the East Coast. We will lead in fishing, we will lead in offshore wind, and when it comes to marine innovation, we're going to lead there too. Thank you. Now, our effort to support a diversified and an inclusive economy is hardly limited to the waterfront. There are businesses actually on land, as I think all of you know. The downtown, for starters, continues to grow. We're seeing more residential development and with several more projects in the pipeline. The New Bedford Harbor Hotel got off to a fast start, and if you haven't been there, go check it out. It's a great place. And there are more restaurants in the pipeline, too. We believe that with the completion also of major infrastructure projects like the Elm Street Garage and the Union Street facelift, which is pretty much done now, we'll usher in still more restaurants and more residential development and more shops, all to the better because it is a vibrant, vibrant downtown. The resurgence of the downtown couldn't have happened without the determination and skillful planning and work and development of Derek Santos and the Economic Development Council, and I'd like to thank them for their unrelenting commitment. So I want to, in an act of confession, talk about a subject that we're all familiar with and don't like to address when we have a full stomach, and that's parking. Downtown has become really popular, and parking, as we know, is not exactly easy. Believe me, I get it. I drive around looking for spaces too, and you know what? Yes, indeed, I too get tickets. But we're doing something about parking in the downtown. Last year, we launched the first comprehensive parking study that the downtown's ever had. And in the coming weeks, we'll have the results of that study, and we'll have some proposals to make parking a lot easier. And so I believe that we're going to heighten convenience through implementing this study, as well as to usher in more economic development. This will allow businesses to make more of what they do, make it easier, and have people say to them in the end, you know what, it's not so bad getting to you after all. And the downtown and the rest of the city, by the way, will benefit from the city's first cultural plan, which was the product of considerable effort this year by our arts community. I know a number of you are in the audience today. Having established the state's first dedicated municipal arts fund, which was a big achievement, we are about to witness the city taking its arts program to the proverbial next level, and so many of you had a stake in it. I want to give all of you a hand in that. That is going to make a difference in our economy. Like any other city, our downtown must have strong anchor institutions. We will support our existing anchor institutions, the likes of the Whaling Museum and the Art Museum, the Zeiterion, and others, and seize every opportunity to develop or recruit new ones. We have to be in this business, whether they are governmental anchors, nonprofit anchors, higher ed anchors, or corporate institutions. We welcome you to New Bedford. We want you to be part of us. In the years ahead, Greater New Bedford's economy can and should benefit from improved transportation connections with other cities. Every elected official, as you know, in southeastern Massachusetts over the last 20 years has advocated for the South Coast Rail Project, and now it appears that the alternate approach through Middleborough is gaining some traction. I think most people have come to understand and appreciate that the project doesn't represent the economic salvation of southeastern Massachusetts, but the connection would offer one more reason for folks to live here and to invest here, and that's a good thing. Another important set of connections will come through our airport. We are winding down a year-long review of the airport's operation that was headed up by Dave Slutz that will yield a strategic plan for really the first time in anybody's memory of the airport. With the recent reconstruction of the runways, the authorization by the Federal Aviation Administration to reignite commercial air service, and with our great partnership with Bridgewater State University, it is mightily important that we have a plan in place because the opportunity is there. That is a big asset for our city, and we're going to work it really hard in the years ahead. And finally, we need to remain a place that supports small business, which so many of you here can well appreciate. We've seen over the last few years a lot of small business growth, and we're going to see more. We've seen increased speed in our permitting processes. We've started to stabilize the commercial tax rates in the city, and we're starting to see more small businesses take risk. And as that builds, we'll continue to see the germination of more and more of those businesses still, and I appreciate, again, the work of the EDC in that effort. Let me talk about quality of life. Successful cities enable the well-being of their residents, and in particular, secure their physical well-being. The decrease in crime in our city is extremely encouraging. It is, and it's simply, and the fact of the matter is that New Bedford, it just feels a lot safer in every single neighborhood. When you go out and talk to people, it is just a much more stable place. It's not on those least safe cities anymore, and we appreciate that, but we're more appreciative of the fact that people in our neighborhoods everywhere are saying, you know what, I just feel a lot more comfortable in this place. Now, there are a number of reasons for the decline, including the growth in our economy, for one thing. That happens, and that lifts a lot of boats. But much credit should also go to the work of our police department, which under the leadership of Joe Cadero has intensified community policing and has made better use of data to make decisions. Our police department has worked really hard, and they have made their presence felt in our neighborhoods at the right place and at the right times. The work also of the Neighborhood Task Force under John Floor's leadership has neutralized many of the sources of crime by eradicating blight and forcing absentee landlords to manage their properties responsibly. And we've been able to rely on the responsiveness of District Attorney Tom Quinn's office to prosecute violent offenders when they appear in our city. Our goal is to get to the point, and this is really what we should hope for everywhere. Our goal is to get to the point when residents of not just most, but all of our neighborhoods can take their safety for granted, so that parents, even in our historically struggling neighborhoods, can let their kids out to play, and seniors can sit on a park bench without having to think twice about it. Now, this is a high bar, but the residents of our city and every neighborhood deserve our best effort. Looking forward, we will continue to modernize our police department. We've recently completed a review of our police department that was initiated on our own initiative to make sure that we get better all the time at what we do. That will guide all of this work. Among other steps, we will continue to supply officers with modern equipment and bolster training and enhance our capacity to manage data. We want to put every single police officer in a position to be as effective as he or she can be. And we will keep up the battle against the opioid epidemic, which at once is the most challenging public health problem of our time and the source of a considerable amount of criminal activity. The problem is not unique in New Bedford, of course, and it's not even the worst here, but it has ended or ruined many lives in our city. As I've said before, it's a complex and multifaceted problem that affects people of every walk of life. So the only way that we're going to turn the tide is through sustained effort at every level of government. Our Opioid Prevention Task Force and the Health Department under Damone Chaplin and our EMS and fire departments have made great strides, and I can report that in the last 2 years we have seen a 35% decrease in fatal overdoses in our city. As encouraging as that is, though, we cannot let up the fight. The work at the municipal level has been greatly aided by the leadership of Attorney General Maura Healey, who has made combating the opioid epidemic a centerpiece of her administration. Whether it's using the legal authority of her office to hold manufacturers of synthetic opioids accountable, prosecuting dealers of fentanyl, or bringing to light the plight of families wrecked by addiction, she has been with us all the way. So I would just ask all of you to join me in personally thanking her for her skillful and determined effort. Just the other day, one of my neighbors who had just come back from running the half marathon mentioned to me that she overheard somebody along the raceway say audibly, "New Bedford looks great." And so my neighbor said to me, she added, I was so proud to hear that. You know, I've lived here my whole life, and you know what, that's exactly right. The place has never looked better. I share that with you because I just love hearing these types of comments because it is so validating of the work of our city employees and everyone else who does a little bit extra to clean up their neighborhoods or make their houses look just so. The efforts proclaim to everyone that New Bedford is a city that cares about itself. Now, these improvements don't happen by accident. A few years ago, we made a conscious decision to seize responsibility for the physical condition and appearance of our city. For too long, the city neglected its built environment, the buildings, the sidewalks, the roadways, the parks, and the wastewater and water systems, as well as the general cleanliness of the city, all of it. I believe our residents deserve a clean city that is well-designed and visually appealing to everybody, not just the folks who live here, but everybody who would come to visit us. And we followed through all along. We planted nearly 4,000 trees. We've restored, as I mentioned, the City Hall facade. We've revamped the trash system, enforced the trash laws, wiped out graffiti to the point where you've got to go looking for it to find it, and built 5 new neighborhood parks. The Harbor Walk and Cove Walk have not only become enormously popular neighborhood amenities, but regional destinations. When the weather is warm, you'll see constant activity and enjoyment. You'll see people running and walking their dogs, or maybe even taking a wedding photo, because I've seen that too. As much as we want our city to look good, we also want it to work well. That's why, with the City Council support, we've increased road funding some 75% in the last couple of years, because we want our roadways to work. We want to preserve your shock absorbers. We've spent millions of dollars fixing up our buildings, of which there are some 96 municipal buildings, and retrofitted them with energy efficient technology. It's also why we're investing tens of millions of dollars to make sure that the city's drinking water is safe and affordable, and that our wastewater system continues to function the way that we expect it. That is, in a way that allows us to take it for granted. And I want to thank Jamie Pont, our Commissioner of Public Infrastructure, and his entire team, who are all so skillful, for their diligent management of all these infrastructure initiatives. They're making our city work so much better. Thanks, guys. Central to our city's quality of life, as well as its economic competitiveness, is our ability to offer our children pathways to opportunity through our public schools. The New Bedford Public Schools have come a long way in the last few years. The days when the needs of adults were put before children have receded distantly in the rearview mirror. Now we have a school system that is clear in its academic goals, manages taxpayer dollars reliably, and has raised the standards of academic instruction. There have been long-needed changes to collective bargaining agreements, a revamped curriculum, performance accountability established through teacher and administrator evaluations, and major facilities upgrades. And lifting the monitor from the district a year and a half ago, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education said that this district has made a huge step forward, close quote. And the improvements in student performance are more and more evident. Besides the graduation rate, attendance is up, suspensions are down, enrollment is coming back up, including 300 more kids in the district just this year. Most notably, in the last 2 years, we've seen significant gains at the elementary school level. You've probably heard by now about the work of Darcy Youngst, who's with us today, and the staff at the Congdon School in the South End, where the school leapt to the 85th percentile among state elementary schools, making it the highest performing elementary school in all of southeastern Massachusetts. Now, and I'm looking at Darcy, you've heard that before, and it's good that she's become a rock star principal in our city. But what she'll be quick to tell you is that the majority of elementary schools in the city took a big step forward. They're all scoring very, very well now, with a few exceptions, and those exceptions are catching up. And the trick now is to extend those gains to those remaining elementary schools as well as the middle schools, and that is going to happen. We're proud of the work being done as well as at the city's two major public high schools, New Bedford High School and Voc Tech. Here at the high school, under Headmaster Coelho's leadership, considerable progress has been made in student performance. The passing rate on advanced placement tests has doubled, and the establishment of the Honors Academy and the AP Capstone programs will lead to still more students from this school getting into America's elite colleges. And speaking of achievement, and I hope she's here today, I wanted to give a shout out to one particular senior of whom I am especially proud. When Janice Leo, where's Janice? There's Janice. Janice, I can see you over a crowd usually. So when Janice was an eighth grader, her gym teacher at the Roosevelt High School, Rachel Lassie, suggested that she go out for volleyball, a sport that Janice had never played before and otherwise had no interest in at all. After some repeated and gentle urging over time, Janice decided to give it a shot. Now, some 4 years later, after leading a volleyball team that hardly lost a game along the way, Janice is heading to the University of Miami on a full volleyball scholarship. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Now, I don't know why Rachel Lassie had any idea that Janice would be good at volleyball. As an eighth grader, she was only 5'11", right? So, but we're very proud of Janice, and I wanted to find some way to embarrass you in my speech, Janice. But one thing to remember is this: so when you turn on ESPN sometime and see Janice playing volleyball for the U, as they call it, remember that she is an example of a student who made the most of an opportunity that was presented to her in a school system where the adults were looking to make that happen. Now, up the street at Voc Tech, we're seeing tremendous work being done to prepare students for tomorrow's workforce. And what's most impressive is the level of collaboration between the school and the business communities to keep their programs relevant and competitive. And that's so important. As I said before, technology is marching forward. We've got to keep keep up and make sure that what we do with our kids in our school systems is relevant to tomorrow's workforce, and to be nimble about it. And that's exactly what they're doing at Voc Tech. And I know that Jim O'Brien is here. I want to give a shout out to the folks over at Voc Tech for all their work. Now, on the subject of Voc Tech, by the way, I wanted to give a shout out to Voc Tech softball coach and a friend of mine, Mark Collins, whose team won the state championship last year in dramatic fashion. He and his staff, and it's just amazing, starting a freshman pitcher for the first time in a state championship game, and they pulled it off. Pretty cool. Took a lot of guts, but they made it happen. And I just want to say that he and his staff have put in the time all year long to build an effective athletic program, and it certainly has paid off. I really want to congratulate you, Mark, for being such a fabulous coach and mentor. Now, I am highly optimistic, very optimistic, and I hope that you are too, in the prospects for our schools. They've made considerable progress despite the headwinds of demographic changes and tight budgets. And I'm encouraged by the work of our teachers and administrators who often perform under intense pressure. And I'm tremendously confident in our school leadership. Superintendent Thomas Anderson has set the right tone from the start. His standards are appropriately high, but the focus of his work is to enable administrators and teachers to develop the capacity to reach those standards. He has everyone working together, and I just ask everybody to work behind him because the school systems are on the move. Now, toward that end, I believe it is imperative that we as a city articulate a clear vision for our schools and then devote ourselves in pursuit of that vision. For many years, our school system was unable to change with the times. And when performance suffered, as it inevitably would, no one owned the problem. Even when the district made progress while the state more recently had it under monitoring, there was always this sense that we were doing what we were doing because we were told to do it by the state. That is, the work was more about compliance than about building the kinds of schools that we wanted to see. With school leadership now in place, new school leadership now in place, and the monitoring having ended, it is time now for us to fly the plane on our own. In the coming weeks, the superintendent will lead a series of discussions to hear from stakeholders in our schools, from everybody. And by stakeholders, I mean pretty much everybody who lives in Greater New Bedford, because everybody has a stake in it. We want to build a school system that cultivates in students a capacity and desire for lifelong learning, especially in a time, as I noted, of rapid economic change, that both reinforces our city's collective values and unlocks the full potential of every single student. I encourage everybody to weigh in to this process. I don't mean, and by the way, I don't mean to suggest that the state, which provides the lion's share of our school funding, doesn't have a say in our school system. It does. Rather, I'm saying something a little bit different, which is this. This is a process which is an opportunity for our city to affirm the notion that our children's future is primarily our responsibility. None of this work, and this is the part of the program where people usually call for their service for more caffeine when I talk about municipal finance, but none of this work can happen if we don't manage taxpayer dollars effectively. It just can't happen. Our bond rating, which compares very favorably to the industrial cities in the Northeast, shows that we've been pretty good at it, but it hasn't been easy, not for one moment since I got into office. And you've heard me say it before, money is in fact tight. It is, it just is. And we've made cuts to city government, and it's been considerably, the government as an enterprise is considerably smaller, but more efficient than it was some 10 years ago. Yet the pressure on taxpayers, especially small businesses, has only increased. And I don't think I need to remind anybody in this room of that fact. Now going forward, we remind ourselves that money's been tight in a time of relative growth. What's going to happen when the national economy turns downward, as it inevitably will, because what comes up must come down, and state tax and state aid to local communities starts to fall off? I want to make really clear, as I've done before, but it bears emphasizing, that I will not allow our city to be put in a precarious financial position. And so we're going to be taking more affirmative steps to protect against that. And I know the City Council, and I'll note particularly Linda Morad and Joe Lopes are especially appreciative of this, and it's been very important and gratifying to work with them so closely in stewarding the city's budget. We will continue to reorganize city government to increase efficiency, as we've done with considerable success over the last few years. We will make every effort to expand the tax base by encouraging the development of underutilized parcels of property. And that's why, by the way, the municipal golf course project is so important in the years ahead. That project, of course, was put on hold in part in entirety because of a state Supreme Court decision that complicated the land transfer, but it is now moving forward, and you'll hear more about that in the months to come. Meanwhile, I will continue to fight for more school funding, as I did last week when I testified at the State House to change the state school funding formula. This is an important decision, important discussion happening at the state level, and New Bedford will continue to be in the fight, and I know that Representative Cabral and the rest of the delegation see it the same way. We want our kids to have what the kids in affluent districts have in the way of opportunity in their public schools. Now that's not the only thing that we're doing, and I want to add one other thing that may seem minor, but is a really big deal to our city, and that's the federal census. We are working very hard to ensure that New Bedford gets every federal and state penny it is entitled to by making sure that the U.S. Census counts every single person within the four corners of the city of New Bedford. I happen to share the belief held by many that not everybody in New Bedford was counted in the last census, and that we've lost out on federal and state program funding as a result. To make sure that we get it right, we will, and I'm announcing this today, we are going to hire a census coordinator to work with our complete count committee. This step is absolutely necessary because we can't rely on others to do that work for us. The administration in Washington has reduced the resources available to the cities and has added the politically motivated citizenship question to the census form, whose only practical effect will be to scare off participation in places that have large immigrant populations, cities like New Bedford. Despite these impediments, we will get an accurate count, and that we're determined to do that. And I encourage everyone to spread the word about just how important the census is to this city. Now, when it comes to our finances, and I'll just close with this on money, we will hustle for every last dollar and spend it as we always have, which is like it's our very own personal money. You have my pledge of that. Now, I wanted to talk about one more thing when it comes to the city's quality of life, but I will hasten to qualify my remarks by saying that it's not something that city government has any formal control over, but it is so important to the vitality of our city and really every city. All across America, cities are struggling with the decline in local media coverage. The explanation for the problem is generally understood to be that the internet offers advertisers the ability to reach more prospective customers at lower cost than traditional print newspapers. As advertisers have decamped to online platforms, newspapers have seen their revenue plummet and their capacity to cover news contract. At the same time, the proliferation of online media has fragmented the media market, which now rewards speed to publish, still at greater expense to the breadth and depth of coverage. As a result, Americans, and this is probably true here in New Bedford, Americans know less about what matters in their cities now than ever before. And that is alarming. And it should alarm every single one of us. Local newspapers, of course, play an indispensable role in holding public officials accountable. And frankly, it's probably for that reason that you don't hear many more public officials talking about this issue. Not to sound cynical, but think about it for a moment. But more fundamentally, local newspapers establish a bulwark of trust in a community. They're the backstop. And especially in a rapidly changing world, people need a credible source of information about matters that, because they're happening right around the corner, are of immediate relevance to their lives. When misleading information, call it fake news, call it whatever you want, that swirls in the public realm is allowed to become the gospel truth, public trust further erodes and renders society less able to solve its collective problems. Now, city papers have long filled the role of the indispensable arbiter of factual disputes in communities, a role that the framers of the Constitution well appreciated when they enshrined the freedom of the press in the First Amendment over 200 years ago. With these concerns in mind, and at the risk of ingratiation, I want to thank in particular the staff at the Standard Times for soldiering on despite the pressures in their organization to do less than they would like. We may not agree all the time, but I am glad they do what they do, and I ask you to join me in thanking them. Now, I acknowledge that I don't have a definitive answer to the problem, and I haven't read one anywhere yet. I'm not sure anybody has a definitive answer to the problem. But our city needs to be talking about it because it is really important. And I also want to use this occasion before members of the business community and others listening or watching to urge you to support your local newspaper. Your city needs it to function effectively. And in the long run, your support will be good for business too. In administering city government, we strive to base our decisions on a careful evaluation of available information and in light of our best judgment of the city's interest. That's what we try to do. And in a time when trust in government institutions is waning and resources are scarce, this deliberate, evidence-based approach to governing is what I believe our city needs and deserves. At the same time, we can't lose sight of what also keeps cities going and makes life in them worth living. Now, and that what I'm talking about now is love of the place itself, not something you can just govern. I do what I do because I love New Bedford. And if you are here today, certainly you do too. A city is more than a place on a map. It shapes and frames our relationships with one another and is woven through all of us. And when you love where you live, you'll commit yourself to acts of love on its behalf and make it an even better place and improve yourself in some small way along the way. And that's exactly what two residents of the North End have been doing in the last several months. As perhaps all of you know, since my last State of the City address, a police officer in the town of Yarmouth on Cape Cod named Sean Gannon was shot and killed by a career criminal he was trying to apprehend. Sean was a New Bedford guy. He grew up off of Morton Avenue in the North End, went to Bishop Stang, and came from a terrific family. He was just an all-around great guy. Sean's family home is right across the street from the Campbell School. That's where Sandy Douglas and Carla Moreo send their kids to school. At the time of the tragedy, they were heading up a fundraising drive for a new school playground. Carla and Sandy immediately stepped up. They embraced the idea that the playground should not only be named in Sean's honor, but that it should be first-rate to befit the honoree. That meant slowing down the project and a whole lot more work to raise funds and a whole lot more hassle. But they got after it because it was the right thing to do. To date, they have raised over $200,000 from private and public sources, and the project is on time. It's going to open up in the fall to the great delight of so many kids. But perhaps even better, Sean's parents, Denise and Patrick Gannon, will be able to look out their front window at that playground and behold their son's legacy of service and the joyful faces of children at play. Please join me in thanking Sandy and Carla for stepping up in a huge way for our city. And they're still taking donations. Sandy and Carla have reminded us all that New Bedford is still one of those very special places that is defined by love and the acts of generosity and selflessness that love inspires. Thank you very much, everybody, and God bless our city. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.